Hey everyone. The signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 marks the transition from the colonial era to the federal period. Characteristics are a strict version of classicism called neoclassical. In America, this is called the federal style of architecture and design. Much is based on published works from the Renaissance, such as Palladio. Detailed drawings and measurements from archaeological sites like Athens bring inspiration of Greek precedents. So Thomas Jefferson is a very important figure bringing neoclassical design to America. He was the American ambassador to France from 1784 to 1789. And so the French Renaissance, which is heavily rooted in classicism, had a huge influence. For example, Jefferson designed the state capital of Virginia in Richmond while he was in France. It was built in 1785. And it's based on the temple form of the Maison Carrée. It has a six-columned portico and a pediment facade. Two stories aren't typical of antiquity, but at this time it was necessary to serve some functional purposes and helps us to tell that this definitely isn't a building from antiquity. Ionic order columns were used instead of the Corinthian ones, like the Maison Carrée model, because Jefferson felt American stonecutters weren't skilled enough to create the Corinthian details. This use of ancient building design for a modern purpose is the first step toward the stylistic revivals of the 19th century. This is Thomas Jefferson's home. It's called Monticello in Charlottesville, Virginia. It uses Palladian and Roman concepts. You see here a columned portico and a domed octagon, which are based on Palladio's Villa Rotunda. Jefferson is also responsible for the design of the University of Virginia. The campus is planned with a central mall that's surrounded by small college buildings called lodges. Today, the academically elite are invited to live on the lawn. It's a very prestigious honor, and the buildings are all connected by columned covered walkways on either side. And a domed rotunda at one end serves as the library. It's actually modeled after the Roman Pantheon, which we learned about at the very beginning of the semester, but it's one half of the size of the Pantheon in Rome. The plan and design of the grouping of buildings conveys dignity and order. It is an expertly adapted Palladian villa design to serve a totally different purpose. Here are some detail shots of the lodges that surround the central mall. Like I said, a select few of the highest performing students are invited to live here on the lawn. It's a very prestigious honor. Another important figure, Charles Bulfinch, had visited England and saw the work of the Adams brothers there, who we also studied very recently. Taken from that inspiration, we see the first use of the Golden Dome as a symbolic marker of a state capitol building. Today, almost all states have this design feature on their capitol building, as well as the national capitol. In the Adams style, we see Palladianism and French neoclassicism with delicate ornamental detail. This home is designed with a grand central staircase and a Palladian window on its interior. The sweeping curved stairs are a major characteristic of the federal style interior. Again, it's the Adams style that Bulfinch is using for the residence. On the exterior, there's double-level columned portico and delicate plaster ornamental detail that show the classical design influence. Oval rooms are another major characteristic of federal-style interiors. Here we see an example at the William Hamilton House in Philadelphia. Taking a quick look at the floor plan, you see the two oval rooms. In 1792, a design competition was held to create a design for the national capitol in Washington. None of the 10 designs submitted were actually selected. Instead, William Thornton, who was an amateur architect, submitted one that both Jefferson and Washington liked. So, this version of the national capitol is what was built. It was, however, burned in the War of 1812, so we have a slightly different version today. Thornton often worked in Adams style as well. Both of these are more examples of his work that have a single projecting curved element that accent the central axis of the homes. So back at the national capitol, we talked about the fire. The fire was so extensive that the majority of the interior had to undergo extensive reconstruction. And Benjamin Latrobe was responsible for the detail of the two large legislative chambers and for the smaller spaces that make up the internal plan of the building. He was also responsible for the creation of American variations of the Greek orders, which were used in the redesign of the Capitol building's vestibules. Capitol columns using tobacco leaves and corn husks, truly American things, instead of Greek and Roman acanthus leaves like the Corinthian columns were used. Latrobe also made a second order that was based on the magnolia flower, another very American symbol. Latrobe also designed federal-style townhouses in Washington. Here is his house for Stephen Decatur on Lafayette Square. We'll hear more about Lafayette Square and the designs on it in just a few slides. The ground floor is for services with the two floors living above. The only ornament on the exterior is an entrance with side windows and a delicate fan light window above the door. St. John's Church, across the street from Decatur Townhome, was also designed by Latrobe. It is neoclassical in style with a colonnaded portico and triangular pediment. It's dubbed the Church of the Presidents. St. John's Church is a historic Episcopalian chapel located across the street from the White House in Washington, D.C. Every U.S. president since 1815 has attended occasional services here. On June 1st, 2020, amid the George Floyd protests in Washington, D.C., law enforcement officers used tear gas and other riot control tactics to forcibly clear peaceful protesters from Lafayette Square and surrounding streets, creating a path for President Donald Trump and senior administration officials to walk from the White House to St. John's Episcopal Church. Trump held up a Bible and posed for a photo op in front of Ashburton House, which is the church's parish house next door. It had been damaged during a fire protest the night before. So this is how you might recognize St. John's Church in the very recent news. Back to the national capitol. It was actually Charles Bulfinch, who we now know for his gold domes, that designed the original rotunda and low dome on the National Capitol building. The dome was constructed of wood, covered by copper, and light was admitted through an oculus. But by the 1850s, the dome was considered too small for the vastly enlarged Capitol building. It was also a fire hazard and in constant need of repair. So a new fireproof dome was considered a necessary and practical improvement to the Capitol. The dome you see today was designed by Thomas Walter in 1854 to meet this new criteria and is made of cast iron. Bulfinch's dome was removed in 1856, and a temporary roof was installed over the rotunda to protect it during the construction project, which was actually drawn out by several factors, including the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. The dome was finally finished in 1866. Moving through the federal design style, we see the revival of more design influence of the English neoclassical and an empire style called English Regency. During the first decades of the 19th century, Duncan Phyfe and Charles Honore Lenoir were the acknowledged leaders of the New York furniture trade. Both immigrant craftsmen, they established a distinctive New York style of cabinet making that incorporated contemporary European design. Americans throughout the young nation considered their work to be the pinnacle of taste and sophistication. Phyfe actually came to the United States from Scotland in 1784. He settled with his family in Albany before relocating to New York City in 1791. By 1800, he had established himself as a cabinet maker on the move, Over the next 2 decades, Fife purchased a number of properties on Fulton Street, near City Hall and New York's most fashionable shopping destinations, to house his manufacturing and wareroom. A watercolor rendering of Fife's operation includes the extent of his production capabilities, which many of New York's wealthy residents frequented for their furnishing needs. Fife's greatest contribution to the industry was perhaps his role in introducing the city to a unique blend of the English neoclassical and Regency styles. It was found in design books such as Thomas Sheraton's The Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer's Drawing Book, which you've also just recently learned about, and Thomas Hope's Household Furniture and Interior Decoration. His shop is thought to have greatly influenced the aesthetic interests of local patrons. Along these lines, the cabinet maker introduced elements such as lyres, harps, and into his furniture that related contemporary decorative arts to the motifs of classical antiquities. Because Fife's career lasted through the 1840s, his shop eventually transitioned to produce wares in the late Grecian and Rococo and Gothic Revival styles as well. Here, notice the Ionic column inspiration of the chair's backsplat and strut. Only rarely did Fife attach a trade label to his furniture, and so a few objects in the Fife style can be conclusively linked to the cabinet maker through documents or family histories, but not a lot of his other furniture is 100% for sure known. Historians presume that Fife's confidence in the skill of his craftsmen and the prominence of his style precluded the need to label his furnishings. One of the most thoroughly substantiated Fife commissions includes a suite of chairs and matching sofas made in 1807 for the New York townhouse of prominent banker William Baird. A surviving invoice from Fife confirms the sale. In 1931, Henry Francis DuPont purchased from the nephew of Baird's granddaughter 10 side chairs, 2 armchairs, and a sofa, thought to be from this commission. They now reside in the Winterthur Museum's Fife Room. Other Duncan Fife characteristics are Hepplewhite and Sheridan influences, 3-legged pedestal tables with folding tops, simple reading to elaborate carving, swags, pedestals, and pineapple finials, applied brass ornament, castered legs on large pieces, and he often uses a very rich mahogany. So he's using all of these classical details. He's imitating the French Directoire and later French Empire style. Lenoir trained in Paris as an ébéniste, which is the French term for cabinet maker, before he relocated to New York in 1803. By 1804, until his death in 1819, he operated a shop at 60 Broad Street, among the city's thriving manufacturing and historical financial districts. Lenoir first offered his patrons furniture executed in the delicate directory style, before moving on to the more robust French consulate and empire approach. Artifacts such as a console table and a bedstead reveal his reliance on journals and books published by French designers, such as Charles Percier and Pierre Fontaine, who we've also learned about. To compete with those working in the more restrained Anglo-American taste, Lenoir occasionally melded the two approaches into an assimilated style that would appeal to a broad range of customers. Like Fife, Lenoir often incorporated decorative elements taken from the architecture and furnishings of ancient Greece and Rome. The ébéniste promoted his European training and knowledge of contemporary Parisian modes by attaching a trade label to his furniture that was written in both English and French. Lenoir also continued the French tradition of using a stamp to mark his wares. Such methods were an important form of advertising and ensured the curious customer would know from whom an associate's belongings had been purchased. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Lenoir used these marketing techniques regularly, and thus a sizable body of marked furniture of his is known today, unlike Duncan Fife. In consideration of their prominent position within the cabinet-making trade, other artisans copied the work of Fife and Lenoir to draw more business into their shops. In the account book of New York furniture maker John Hewitt, One finds references such as Fife's column, 23 inches with leaf carved. This reference suggests that Hewitt used detailed measurements from the wares of these prominent craftsmen in order to produce furniture closely modeled after their work. Furthermore, Fife and Lanier often influenced one another's aesthetic approach. A labeled Lanier chair closely resembles Anglo-American styles of the aforementioned suite made by Fife for William Baird. Occasionally, wealthy New Yorkers like Baird would patronize both Lanier and Fife, depending on their shifting tastes and household needs. Baird placed a wardrobe and dressing table, purchased from Fife in 1807, adjacent to a French bedstead acquired from Lanier in 1805. Baird returned to the French Ebony shop in 1817 to obtain a partial suite of parlor furniture to present to his daughter Maria in honor of her marriage to Duncan Pearsall Campbell. New York cabinet makers like Fife and Lanier could increase their chances at financial success by taking advantage of the city's role as a prominent port. Some exported their wares to markets in America's mid-Atlantic and southern states, in addition to destinations in the Caribbean, such as Cuba and Guadeloupe. These manufacturers could either ship large lots of furniture on a spec basis for sale in southern stores, auction houses, and warerooms, or would work on consignment for particular customers in those locales. Generally, the wares sent on a spec basis were of lesser quality than those ordered directly from the cabinet maker. For example, in an 1816 letter to wealthy Philadelphia Charles Banker, Fife included illustrations and prices for the elegant chairs he could offer, while a slightly different design, a set of chairs with carroul-shaped bases and splats, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection, is attributed to Fife based on these drawings. This connection between Northern craftsmen and Southern consumers is reinforced through the Museum of Modern Art's Richmond Room, which combines an architectural interior from that city with the elegant Empire-style furniture of Fife and Lanier, both of whom benefited from the patronage of wealthy Southerners. In addition to standing among the most prominent craftsmen of their era, Fife and Lanier have become two of the most recognized names in the field of American decorative art scholarship. A series of museum exhibitions that began in 1909 and the efforts of collectors and antique dealers in the early 20th century solidified this position. With such notoriety came the desire to associate objects with the shops of these cabinet makers. When a historic artifact can be conclusively linked to a particular artisan, it becomes both more significant academically and more valuable monetarily. By comparing pieces of furniture that carry a signature, a trade label, or a stamp to those that do not, museum curators attempt to attribute unmarked objects to a particular craftsman's shop by analyzing objects and aspects of design, materials, and construction techniques. Since Lanier so avidly labeled and stamped his wares, a large body of furniture can be confidently connected to his shop. With Fife, who attached labels only infrequently, such considerations are much more complex. The problem is compounded by the attention his shop received in the early 1800s as well as the early 1900s. Early 19th century craftsmen working in the style of Fife, like John Hewitt, were able to provide high-quality wares with similar designs that cloud the attribution process. A number of objects that were originally thought to have come from Fife's shop are now considered to be the work of one of his competitors. Furthermore, the interest of collectors at the turn of the 20th century resulted in a large number of reproductions of his work that can also confuse modern scholars and collectors. Immigrant German furniture maker Ernst Hagen served not only as the first historian to document Fife's career, but also helped to promote this renewed attention through the production of chairs and sofas in the style of Fife's antiques. This is a term that is used by furniture salesmen even today, for the Scotsman's designs have never completely fallen out of favor. Fife became the first American cabinet maker to serve as the subject of a comprehensive retrospective with the Metropolitan Museum of Art's 1922 show called Furniture Masterpieces of Duncan Fife. In 2009, he again highlighted Veif's career in a landmark exhibit that tackled the complex questions of taste and manufacture. Lenoir served as a focus of a similar project in 1998. Thanks for following along. Bye-bye.